All right, I've been seeing a lot of videos of late, and when I say of late, that's relative. How long you've been around, you know what I mean? Things change. And I've been seeing a lot of videos where a lot of bigger guys that are competitive bodybuilders are, on that road to trying to be competitive. I don't know how competitive they are, but they're big. They got a good bit of muscle. I've seen them on Instagram. I've seen them on YouTube talking about how machines are literally one guy, he's a big dude, a lot of muscle, actually came out and said that why do we use machines instead of free weight? Because machines are better. And then he did clarify that by saying that, his primary concern or his only concern is muscle mass, muscle acquisition, just building muscle. So this really kills me to have to concede and say this, but he might be right. He might be right. I guess if you were a young guy today and you would say to me, what's the best approach for me training wise? Just to build the most amount of muscle that I can, to stay injury free. I don't care about how strong I get. I don't care about functionality. All I care about is building a big muscular physique to step on a bodybuilding stage and be competitive. I might have to give the nod to the machines over the free weights. And that really is really disappointing for me to have to say that. But I look back on it, I've trained with both. I train with both now. More machines as I've gotten older. And I've never been injured with a machine. I've never been injured training with a machine. Every time I've been injured, it's been with free weights. And now I've been lifting for 38 or 39 years, so very close to 40 years. And so that's a lot of lifting. You're not going to, be around that long and never experience an injury at all, I think. But it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm seeing these guys now, and this is a new thing to me. I'm seeing these guys that are able to get really big, and I'm looking at how they train, and there's no correlation to me. There's no sense of it or reasoning with how they can train the way that they train and have the amount of muscle mass they have. And so I come to the conclusion, and this is another really sad thing, and it's a difficult thing for me to have to accept, but I think it's exactly like Rich Gaspari just said in a recent interview he did with Mike O'Hearn. And Rich said that what he sees are the younger or later generations coming after him now, and after me, of course, because I think I'm older than Rich. He says that they seem to have replaced work ethic and their intensity in training, their real intensity, not what they think is intensity now, not what they display as examples of intensity, but that they've exchanged that for just more drugs. That now they rely so heavily on drugs, and more drugs, rather than, the older tried and true method of just lifting heavy and eating correctly to build muscle, eating, old school type of approach. Now, I was a very big guy, a lot of muscle, big as anybody, and as big as I was at my biggest back in, 05 or 6 or 7, if I were that same physique today, I'd still be as big as anybody. So, I never lacked for size. I was ahead of the curve there, back then, pretty much. But I got there by mostly free weight stuff, a lot of free weight stuff. My physique was built on the basic mainstay, three lifts: deadlift, squat, and bench press. And when I got bigger and I got stronger and I could lift more weight, as the weights went up and I lifted heavier and the food went up and I ate more food, I just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it was direct correlation. How much weight I could rep for a 10 rep set, when that weight continually increased, I continually gained size. And that's because, of course, the diet, the nutrition was there to support that, to enable that. But that stimulus was that heavy weight. And I had a really big, dense, thick, gnarly physique, gritty and just really dense, turned sideways and just really thick. And, that came from heavy, heavy weight. So, I know that works. And I saw it around me. I trained with a lot of guys that lifted a lot of weight, heavy weight, but that's what we did back in the day. That's what we knew, so, and the drugs weren't like anything as they are today. So I'm beginning to understand why these modern guys, they look at older guys and what we looked like back in the day, some of the physiques and how big they were, and they swear up and down that we're lying when we relate the doses and the chemicals, what we actually use to acquire those physiques or to develop those physiques. I understand why they can't believe it and why they say, oh, well, they're lying. I understand why they impugn another man's character that they don't even know him, right? They call somebody a liar. And it's because, well, A, men aren't what they used to be, so they don't understand what dignity and respect is and character is. And B, that's a whole foreign concept to them. That the way that they train and the way that they eat, they really would not be capable of building that much muscle with that little bit of anabolic assistance. And from our perspective back then, that was not a little bit. That wasn't a little bit. But when you look at today, all these years later, it's a little bit. It's a fraction of what these guys use. As far as the variety of compounds and amounts, it's a fraction. It's a fraction, and like I've said a lot of times that maybe people don't understand what I'm saying, but it was kind of like just to check off your list, Is food sufficient? Check. Is water sufficient? Check. Is the gear sufficient? Check. And then it all came down to, getting psyched up without pre-workouts, without caffeine, really, maybe a cup of coffee. But it all came down to going into the gym and actually, that's where the rubber met the road, the bullet met the bone, is getting in there and actually getting it done and placing that demand, creating that stimulus with heavy, heavy weight. Ball check time. I'm going in the gym tonight and I'm going to move a shit ton of fucking weight. And today, these guys, the overall prevailing mentality, not everybody, but the overall prevailing mentality is they don't even get that. That's completely a foreign concept to them. When they literally believe that they are lifting hard and they are training hard, they're really not doing shit. Really, in my opinion, they're not. It's all the gear. It's all the fucking gear. They literally take so much gear today that I almost think that they would just grow without even doing anything, just eat and take gear. They wouldn't grow enormous, but I believe they would probably gain muscle just from that alone. It's a shame, I think. So, when you consider looking at it from today's perspective, if you're wanting to be a bodybuilder and you want to compete, that's what you want to do. Should you lift primarily with machines or primarily free weights? I'd have to say that probably, I guess these guys are doing it with mostly all machines now. That's what they're saying, and that's what I'm seeing. And I believe them. Now me, depends on what you want, and what trips your trigger, what floats your boat, right? What tickles your ivories. You know, me, I couldn't get it up for that. I can't get it up for that. That's why these some bitches need all this caffeine and these pre-workouts now. That's why they need all that shit, all these stims. You know, Christ, I would too. To go into the gym and just just use machines and not go in there and get psyched and get under heavy weight and move heavy weight, you know, and really truly challenge yourself like that, where you know there could be an injury if something went, you know, askew or got out of line, or tonight might not be your night. You may fail. That weight may dominate you, you know, but you may dominate that weight, and that's a really good feeling, you know. But if I were one of these guys today, I would need all those stims and shit to go into the gym and do the workouts I see most of these guys doing. To me, that wouldn't entice me to even go to the gym, you know. So again, it all comes down to what you enjoy. For me, it was never primarily, ever about trying to build a physique that I could step on a stage, put on a pair of panties and shave all my body hair and slather myself up in oil and get up underneath a bunch of lights for a predominantly male audience, you know, that are positioned to accentuate my muscularity and pose. That was never an enticement for me. Yeah, the only reason I got into any of that is I actually, foolishly enough, thought maybe I could make $1 at it. That's the only reason. But the reason I started lifting and fell in love with that was the actual challenge of moving the iron, moving today what was immovable for me yesterday, you know. And of course, I don't mean a day apart. You understand what I'm saying? You know, moving tomorrow what I can't move today. The satisfaction in that, the triumph in that. So for me, it was always about, I've never considered that it would be worthwhile to have a whole bunch of muscle and not be strong. You know, not be comparatively strong. Makes no sense. But I do a lot of other things, man. And if you're not training like that with free weights, and it's all machines, man, you're not developing those stabilizers. You know, you're locked into a plane of movement, a groove, and for better and for worse. I mean, for worse and practicality reasons out in the real world. You know, you build all that muscle. Yeah, what are you going to do with that? Other than just put on a pair of panties and slather yourself with oil and get up underneath a bunch of lights for a bunch of guys basically on stage. What else are you going to do with that? You're not going to do much with that. You're just not. You're going to get fucked up. You're going to get hurt if you think you're going to go out there and be able to do the same things with that physique that you could have done if you had built it with free weights. Because if you built it with free weights, all the stabilizers come into play. There's no weak link in the chain then. You know, you can pick things up and you can throw them over your shoulder and you can actually put in a day of work, real hard work, and those muscles are an advantage. That strength and power is an advantage. You know, let alone if you get into some kind of tussle with another man. I mean, if all you've been lifting is machines, you're going to get injured very easily. And that's the reality of it. You may not get injured lifting with those machines, but if you have a real life and you actually do other things besides that, you know, and you think those muscles are going to come in handy, you're going to probably get hurt. Anyway, that's my feeling on it. You know, if your primary motivation for wrapping your beaters around a barbell or a dumbbell is because you dream of getting on a stage and, you know, putting on a pair of panties and shaving all your body hair and prancing around, then yeah, you should probably train with predominantly or primarily machines and take a boatload of fucking gear to make up for, you know, the stimulation that you are not providing. You know, so that little bit of shit you think is intensity will be sufficient with all that gear. Christ, I guess the way we used to train, if we took anywhere near that amount, we'd have probably been 400 pounds. Anyway, you know, I mean, you look at all those big dudes, guys like Ronnie Coleman. That was a lot of heavy weight. Kevin Levrone, what's a 600-pound flat bench? You know, I know he tore his pec down there on Route 40. What was that gym called? I don't remember the name of the gym. It's old, long time ago. When he tore his pec, he was going for a 600-pound bench. You know, there were a lot of strong dudes on the East Coast that I knew and that I saw in gyms. A lot of strong dudes, and I was one of them. And I don't see it like that today. I'm not saying there aren't any out there in the bodybuilding end of things or spectrum, but you know, I guess it comes down to what you really want.